All right, so we already did attendance naturally, and we're going to introduce introductions, obviously, because it's the very first thing you say. You want to make a good impression when you're giving your speech. We're going to talk about different ways to capture attention. A really good attention getter does multiple forms of attention getting. I'll explain in a little bit more detail. I'll give you a video example. It was actually a video I just saw this morning where I thought they did a good job of capturing attention and keeping me watching. We'll have a little activity. You're going to create an attention getter of some kind. It doesn't really matter what kind, about what topic. It's just to get the juices flowing. Credibility and goodwill, just a statement on that, because if people don't think you're a credible speaker, nobody's going to listen to you. And if people don't think you have their best interests in mind, people are inclined to not listen either. Then we'll talk about how to prepare an introduction. Pretty basic stuff. The different ways you can conclude a speech, and then how to prepare a conclusion, and then talking about next class on Thursday. So, in the introduction, we're trying to gain people's attention, and not just gain attention, but hold their attention. Because anybody can gain it, but how do you actually keep people listening? And how do you keep people interested? Sporadic movements, but you don't want to be too sporadic, because then it's like, ooh, what's he on? Credibility and goodwill. Like I said, people don't think you're credible, they won't listen. You will reveal your topic to the audience. You shouldn't just jump right into your main points and like, in this speech, I'm going to talk to you about this. You kind of need to give people an example of where you're going or an idea of where you're going. Then you preview your body, your main points, the center of your speech. The introduction is the top bun. Okay, here's the different ways you can gain attention. And I'm going to do some citing from the book here. Relate the topic to your audience. So, in the book, it says one way you can relate the topic to the audience is, today I'm going to talk to you about dreams, a subject that has always fascinated me. I will look first at why we dream and then how psychologists interpret the meaning of dreams. It's okay, but that's more of a main point preview as opposed to a good introduction. Everybody think of this. You're being chased by an object of unspeakable horror, yet your legs can only move in slow motion. Each step takes unbearably long, and your frantic struggle to run faster is hopeless. Your pursuer gets closer, and your desperation turns to terror. You're completely helpless, eye to eye with death. Then you wake up, gasping for air, your heart pounding, your face clammy with sweat. It takes a few minutes for your heart and breathing to slow down. You reassure yourself that it was just a dream. Soon you drift back to sleep. So, we've all can relate to that situation. We've all had nightmares. We've all had bad dreams. So that's a way you can relate the topic to your audience that isn't just everybody dreams. The importance of the topic. Your book talks about climate change, and why it's important, because very simple. People don't think it's important. They won't listen. Startle your audience. Now, this is from your book. Take a moment and think of 3 women closest to you. Who comes to mind? Your mother, your sister, your girlfriend, your wife, your best friend? Now guess which one of them will be sexually assaulted during their lifetime. It's not a pleasant thought, but according to the US Department of Justice, 1 in every 3 American women will be sexually assaulted sometime during her life. So it really just kind of gives people the idea of like, wow, this is an important topic. This is not something to be taken lightly. Another thing you can do is arouse curiosity. You'll see an example of that in the video that I will show you here in a little bit. But it's just sort of like, yeah, I am curious about that. I'm interested. I want to learn more. Ask the audience a question. Tried and true, this is a really good way to do this. And these go together. You ask questions to arouse curiosity, like, have you ever thought about this? Why is this? A quotation is also a fantastic way to sort of get people interested. You notice with that statistic on sexual assault, it's a quotation from the US Department of Justice. While it also arouses curiosity, like, why is that? And startling. You can tell a story. I'll give you an example of my own. And use visual aids to just sort of say, here's this graph, here's this information, as you can see from the trends here. So, any one of these, all right? And like I said, they can kind of go together. You can use a visual aid that tells a story. So, a video example. We're only going to watch like the first minute, but I want you to pay attention to what he does to get you to pay attention.
Dwarves were noticeably resistant to the lure of the rings of power. So why not give the ring to Gimli to take to the world? Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to Indie Geek. On this channel, we do deep dives into the lore and world of the Lord of the Rings, as well as A Song of Ice and Fire, The Witcher, and more. If you like the sound of that, there's a subscribe button bottom right of your screen. Gimli was one of the doughtiest members of the Fellowship, and
Okay. So did you see how he established some credibility by being like, this is the channel, this is what we're doing here, but he arouses curiosity in that title of the video, why not give the ring to Gimli? You know, like he was on the count. I don't know if any of you are big fans of Lord of the Rings, but he was there, you know, why not? At the end of the video, they basically say that, oh, it was preordained that Frodo was supposed to have it, but they sort of instill this curiosity. They are like, yeah, why didn't they do that? So you can watch the whole video. It's only 7 minutes long, but I'm not going to do that to you. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. Now, what do I have here on the screen? Nothing. A blank slide is a really good way to get people to pay attention to you again. Because if you just have something on the screen there, are people really going to want to pay attention? Exactly. They're going to want to look at what is on the screen. So use visual aids in a way that's effective. I'm not going to ding you for having blank slides, but I'm going to tell you a story. On December 9th, 2015, one day before his 33rd birthday, Matt Stutzman hit a target from 310 yards, archery. 310 yards, that's 3 football fields long, all right? Breaking the record for longest Guinness ratified distance by any athlete or individual in the world. What do you notice about that guy? He has no arms. At 33 years old, he broke the world record. That's insane to me, you know, because we all have our doubts of, oh, I don't know if I can do this. That never stopped him. Before he ever even hit the target, he knew he was going to do it. He said this in his interview. But that's not the only way you can use this visual aid. You can even start by showing this and then giving the quotation that I just gave. According to an online article from the International Paralympic Committee, this is what he did on December 9th, 2015. So here's the activity for you all to do. You're going to create an intention getter. It can be anything that we mentioned on slide number 5, and it can be about anything you want. All right. Penguins. And you just, oh, penguins. Now I'm curious. You know, what are you going to talk about penguins for? So I'll go back to slide number 5, where you can sort of think, if I was going to try to get somebody's attention, how would I do that? All right. So, because you're all going to have to do that for your speeches, for your personal narratives, for your demonstrative or your informative, and for your persuasive. So, not
one, this is world of the.
Okay. So this is pretty self-explanatory what credibility is. I've already kind of touched on it. If people don't think you're credible, they're not going to listen. Like, what if I came up here and I'm like, hey, this is the first time I've ever taught this class? My credibility is now in question, you know? So what makes you qualified to speak on this topic? Goodwill, does the audience think you have the best interests in mind? Because if you come up here and you talk, you shouldn't be lying to your audience, you know, because they're a captive audience. They can't really help but question these things on their own accord. Woo. And then the most important part of this whole lecture, the preview statement. In this speech, I'm going to tell you about X, Y, and Z. Give people a roadmap for what to expect in your speech. 2 to 5 main points. That's pretty much all you need to know about that. So when creating your own introduction, you got to be concise, to the point. You don't want to spend half of your speech introducing your topic. So about 25% of the time of your speech could be spent, or maybe even 15%. You don't have to get really mathematical about it. Look for materials as you research. Just, if you're going to give me a quotation, where'd the quotation come from? You know, Mark Twain once said this, something like that. Be creative, because there's really no end to how you can grab people's attention. penguins, koalas, being an only child, having to do sign language, all of these things have some notion of creativity behind it. What I'm teaching you in this class is formulaic. What I mean by that is you can make a speech out of anything. And I know that's a little bit daunting, but it's also completely up to you what you want to talk about and how you want to go about explaining it. So you want to, after your body is complete, go back to the introduction and say, does this make sense for me to sort of say, if my attention getter is about penguins, but then later on in the speech I'm talking about ostriches, maybe I need to rethink my attention getter, you know, because, wait, weren't we talking about penguins? Why are we talking about ostriches now? Because we can, exactly. Work out content and delivery in detail. You just want to make sure that it all flows pretty well. All right, the conclusion. It's just mirroring the introduction. And you want to make sure that there's a build up to this point. And that when you're done with your speech, it's got to have some type of boom, some type of something to it, because you don't want to just go, thank you. Go back to your seat. Like, what was that? You know, the whole thing could have been so great. Like, you could say thank you as like the very, very last thing, but you want to make sure you give some type of oomph, some type of memorable moment, because that is the only thing they'll remember, is how your speech just kind of fizzled. That everything was great, but then it just sort of down at the end. So, like, I'm going to skip ahead here. You want to make sure that you give some type of indication that you're in the conclusion, and then you say, again, in the speech, this is what we talked about. You don't have to do all of these things in the introduction, in the conclusion, sorry. You could end with a quote, or make a dramatic statement, or refer back to the introduction. So, like I talked about Matt Stutzman when I gave my speech on archery. So, blank slide again. The next time you think that you can't do something, think again. That's one way you can end your speech. It's just sort of been like, if you ever have any doubts about, oh, I don't think I can do this, it never stopped Matt Stutzman from believing in himself. That was since birth, you guys. He didn't have any arms since birth. It wasn't like he just had them ripped off by a farming tractor. That was always the case, and it never let him slow him down. So I think that's just a really inspirational story, personally. So when writing your conclusion, it's very similar to the introduction. Just make sure you conclude with a bang. That you want to make sure that people are going to want to applaud you at the end. And be brief. Again, you don't want to spend all your time sort of wrapping up your speech because everything was already mentioned. All right, are there any questions about this lecture? All righty. One thing I will show you though, before we depart, I made an announcement about this, but in case you didn't see it, I created a blank outline for you guys to use. You guys are too kind. All you need to know about this is it's under Module 5. Everywhere you'd find everything else for the narrative speech assignment, right here, example preparation outline and blank outline. So, you got your name, title, specific purpose, central idea. If you don't want to include this stuff in the final version of your outline, you don't have to. All right, this is just to give you a starting point where you're going from. Don't spend all your time trying to think, oh my God, what is the title of this going to be? Don't worry about it. Here's your hook. Here's your topic reveal. I literally took the rubric that I'm going to be using to grade your speeches, and this is where it is. So this is what I mean by a formula. You start with your attention getter. You reveal your topic. You say what makes you credible. I researched koalas for 2 hours. Now I'm going to tell you about it. You know, whereas if you're like, I've always been fascinated by koalas or something, you know, just like, why would people listen to you? Then you give your main point preview. Connectives, as we talked about last week, you know, let's begin by talking about main point number 1. You wouldn't put main point number 1, colon, and then what your main point is. Delete that part, and then just whatever your main point is. All right. And as you'll notice here, and we'll talk more about this on Thursday when we talk about outlining, but you have subpoints and supporting materials. If I take a piece of paper and I rip it in half, I have how many pieces? 2, exactly. You can't take a subpoint and only have one piece of supporting material. You can have 3, 4, 5 pieces if you really wanted to, you know? But that's just something I wanted to mention. And another thing is, I only have 2 main points. That doesn't mean you're limited to 2 main points. You can have as many as you want, limited up to like 5. All right. And then in the conclusion, you give a signal like, hey, we're done talking about this. Recap your main points. And then give whatever that mic drop is. All right. Whatever thing that's sort of like, wow, that was captivating, you know? And like I said, all that can be found under module number 5, right under here for the example preparation outline. So, and then you also don't have to have sources for this speech. You don't have to cite anything. So that is that. Any questions? All right. Next class is chapter 11. I'd recommend you read if you haven't read and do the homework if you haven't.